Three Black DEA agents drove a white van through the Atchafalaya swamp on a night when rain poured down like a waterfall in the darkness. Their headlights swept across the rotting wooden planks of the Caddo Crossing Bridge, the boards groaning under the heavy wheels. They had no idea it would be the last time anyone ever saw them alive. 7 years later, that same van was found buried deep in the mud, just a few hundred meters from the bridge. Inside were two bodies, decomposed beyond recognition. But the most haunting part was the corpses. It was the absence of the third man, Jamal Lewis, the youngest agent, whose FBI file contained only a single line. Missing, no trace, right by the creek's edge. A pen engraved with the name of Malik's daughter, Malik being the team leader, was stuck straight into the mud, as if someone deliberately left a message. And a few miles away, a blood-stained piece of tactical jacket fabric was tied around a fishing stake near an abandoned wooden shack. All of it felt like pieces of a twisted game, stirring a chilling fear that someone had been watching, manipulating them, and was still free. Who orchestrated it all? Why did Jamal vanish completely while his two partners died in silence? And why did it take 7 years for these clues to finally rise from the swamp's depths that rainy night? What was buried wasn't just the van, it was the truth. A truth someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. The Atchafalaya isn't just the largest swamp in North America. It's also home to small, scattered communities living along its countless winding canals. Here, Black American families have put down roots for generations, carrying on traditions of fishing and hunting. Living simply but standing together in unity. They know every hidden trail, every patch of sinking mud, every strange tide that rolls through, yet that same isolation, the maze of waterways, has turned this place into a haven for drug traffickers, human smugglers, or anyone desperate to disappear beyond the reach of the law. The night Malik, Jamal, and Ray entered the swamp. The communities around Caddo Crossing still consisted of wooden houses on stilts, their dim yellow lights flickering in reflection over the pitch-black water. The shrill chorus of insects drowned out the roar of motorboats cutting across the channels. Folks here were used to hearing gunshots ring out in the dark, to invisible chases on the water, and to people vanishing without answers. They knew that calling the cops often only made things messier, especially since not every lawman could be trusted. Everyone in this community remembered that rainy night, 3 black men in tactical jackets walking past the old gas station, speaking in tense, hushed tones before driving their white van into the fog. They never returned. They left behind families, loved ones, and a story that spread like a whispered legend. They found something they weren't supposed to know. Malik Johnson, 38, grew up in a middle-class family in Baton Rouge as the eldest son. He stepped up to shoulder the family's burdens whenever his younger brother got into trouble with the law. His resilience and determination carried him through the DEA Academy, where he quickly rose to join a task force fighting smuggling along the Mexican border. But a few years later, Malik requested a transfer back home to Louisiana, hoping to stay close to his wife and daughter and care for his mother, who had developed heart problems. He was a loving father and a devoted husband before he disappeared. Malik had just bought his daughter a pen engraved with her name for her 10th birthday, a promise he'd made to her years earlier. Malik's longtime partner was Ray McCall, 41, a tall, quiet man of few words, but exceptional skill in analysis and marksmanship. Ray grew up in New Orleans, where he saw friends destroyed by drugs, fueling his determination to dismantle the deadly trade. Within the team, Malik was the strategic leader, and Ray was the experienced right hand. Together, they had taken down major trafficking networks, survived assassination attempts in El Paso, dodged car bombs in Laredo, and always returned with an unshaken belief in justice. No one thought that rainy night would be the last time they rode out together. Jamal Lewis, 27, was the youngest member of the team. He was born in a poor neighborhood of Shreveport, where every morning brought the wail of sirens and the sight of police raids. His mother worked overnight shifts as a nurse, and his father died early from cancer. That absence left Jamal with a fierce drive to become the protector his family never had. After earning a college scholarship, he enrolled in a federal training program, quickly standing out with his tech skills and lightning-fast reflexes. On previous missions, Jamal was the one flying the drones, decoding security cameras, and backing up his two older teammates with cutting-edge technology. But his youthful energy and occasional impatience often prompted Malik to remind him, "In this swamp, one rash move and you'll vanish without a trace." Still, Jamal was beloved by the local black community, especially the kids, because he always stopped to talk, share snacks, and encourage them to stay in school. At just 27, he was living proof that it was possible to rise above hardship and become a hero. On the night they disappeared, it was Jamal behind the wheel, guiding the van through the dense fog, and from that moment on, he was never heard from again. On that fateful afternoon, Malik received an anonymous tip about a major drug shipment moving through the Atchafalaya swamp along the Caddo crossing route. The shipment wasn't just carrying heroin. It also contained information about a human trafficking ring using abandoned wooden shacks in the forest as transit points. Malik knew this might be their only chance to break a criminal network that had plagued the region for years. He immediately called Ray and Jamal to gather at the local DEA office. The three men had a brief discussion and planned a covert surveillance operation, knowing the swamp was not only crawling with criminals, but so vast that a single mistake could mean losing the trail entirely. Ray readied his handgun and sniper rifle, while Jamal checked the tracking devices and drone batteries. Malik carefully called his wife, saying only, "I'll be home soon." As they set out, dark clouds rolled in overhead, thick mist rose from the canals, and the air turned heavy and oppressive, as if a storm was on its way. The white van wound its way down narrow dirt roads, tires flinging mud, the engine's rumble echoing through the forest, a few miles from Caddo Crossing. Malik picked up the radio to report Bravo team in position. Commencing mission. That was the last signal ever received from them, after 11 p.m. that night. The DEA lost all contact. Repeated radio calls were met only by a helpless hiss of static. The investigation records showed the van's GPS transmitted its final signal at precisely 12:14 a.m., right in the middle of the Caddo Crossing Bridge. In that moment, no one knew what had happened, only that the GPS flickered erratically, as if jammed, before going dead by the next morning. Backup DEA agents arrived at the scene and found only tire tracks leading onto the bridge, which then disappeared. There were no skid marks, no debris, no blood, and no reports of gunfire. Search teams scoured the creeks, mangroves, and surrounding channels, even enlisting local divers. But for weeks, nothing surfaced except hushed rumors from locals that night. They heard an engine roar, followed by a loud crash echoing through the fog. Some swore they saw headlights blaze in the rain, then vanish. These witnesses were lifelong fishermen who knew the swamp better than anyone, but when police came knocking, every one of them shook their heads, unwilling to talk. The swamp has its own laws, and those who break them tend to disappear. The official search lasted 6 months before ending with the conclusion, missing in the line of duty. With no evidence of foul play, the agents' families were left with nothing but heartbreak and endless, unanswered questions. 6 years later, a massive flood swept through the Atchafalaya, washing away layers of mud and revealing a glimpse of white metal, the missing Ford Transit van. A local survey team immediately alerted the DEA when the van was recovered. Investigators were stunned to find 2 heavily decomposed bodies, one in the front seat and one in the back. But the middle seat, where Jamal usually sat, was empty. Preliminary autopsies revealed both bodies had head trauma and broken ribs, indicating they were attacked before the van sank. Things grew even more puzzling when experts determined the van had only been submerged for about 9 months, meaning someone kept it hidden elsewhere for nearly 6 years before dumping it in the swamp to stage a belated accident. At the same time, the search team found Malik's engraved pen buried deep in the mud near the shore, and a piece of Jamal's tactical jacket tied around a wooden stake several miles away. Forensic analysis confirmed fingerprints and DNA matched the missing agents. These discoveries not only reignited the investigation, but also sparked a fragile glimmer of hope. Could Jamal still be alive, or at least? Did he manage to escape for the local black community? That possibility meant everything. It proved their 3 sons hadn't just vanished in vain, and that someone had gone to great lengths to hide a crime far more sinister than anyone had ever imagined, when the van was finally recovered and the bodies of the two agents were identified. The DEA decided to reopen the case on a scale larger than ever before. Federal agents joined forces with state police, retracing every old lead and re-interviewing each witness recorded in the files from 7 years earlier. But from the very first conversations, investigators noticed glaring contradictions. Bobby Reynolds, a fisherman who once told local reporters he'd heard screams and 3 gunshots that night, now insisted he only heard thunder and nothing unusual. Meanwhile, Loretta Johnson, who owned a small grocery store near the bridge, had previously said she saw nothing but rain and fog, but now claimed she saw headlights sweeping across her window around midnight, though she'd been too afraid to call the police. These shifting stories from residents around Caddo Crossing threw the investigation into chaos. Agents suspected someone had pressured or bribed witnesses shortly after the disappearance to bury the truth. Each conflicting account only strengthened the belief that a powerful force was manipulating information, something that could only happen if the criminals had deep ties to influential figures or law enforcement itself. When a team of young DEA analysts re-examined raw GPS satellite data from the night of the disappearance, they found a detail no one had noticed before between 11:55 p.m. and 12:09 a.m. The van's GPS signal didn't stay fixed on the Caddo Crossing Bridge. Instead, it moved along a narrow path running parallel to the main canal, roughly 800 meters from the bridge. Before returning to the bridge minutes later, the pattern suggested the van wasn't driving on its own, but was being towed or carried by another vehicle. They also discovered several segments of the GPS data were corrupted with strange gaps, as if jammed by signal interference, a technique sophisticated criminal organizations use to break tracking chains. By mapping the van's strange route, investigators pinpointed a roughly 5-acre stretch of dense mangrove forest connected to a secluded river branch, an area long rumored as a stash point for drug traffickers. Yet records from the initial investigation 7 years earlier clearly stated this area had been thoroughly searched with no signs of suspicious activity, who had ensured that place stayed untouched or worse, filed a false report to hide what was really there as they combed through every document from the old case. Federal investigators noticed something unsettling. Every initial report about the agent's disappearance bore the signature of Sheriff Harold Simmons, the Iberville Parish Sheriff at the time. According to standard protocol, a case involving missing DEA agents should have fallen under federal jurisdiction, or at least the regional FBI office. Why then? Did Simmons have exclusive control over the earliest search efforts? Investigators began digging into his past. Simmons had been sheriff for nearly 20 years, known for a tough approach, but also dogged by repeated allegations of excessive force against black residents. In the same year, the agents went missing. Simmons mysteriously paid off nearly $200,000 in mortgage debt, with the money coming from an unspecified personal investment, a vague explanation that raised serious red flags. His financial records showed suspiciously large expenses on travel and real estate, far beyond what a small parish sheriff's salary could afford. Simmons had since retired 3 years earlier and was living quietly in a town 200 miles from the swamp. Complicating the investigation even further, as word spread about the discovery of the van and the bodies, a woman named Vanessa Lewis Jamal's cousin reached out to the investigators. Vanessa recounted how, just days after the agents disappeared, she received an anonymous phone call. A man's voice said bluntly, "Jamal saw something he shouldn't have. Don't look for him, unless you want your family to pay the price." At the time, Vanessa was young, terrified, and thought it was just a cruel prank, so she never contacted police. But after learning what had really happened, she was adamant the voice had a thick, distinctive swamp accent, the kind that couldn't easily be faked. Investigators brought in forensic linguistics experts to analyze the short recording Vanessa had kept from the call. Results suggested the voice closely matched a group of 6 individuals previously monitored by the DEA for suspected involvement in multi-state drug trafficking. Even more troubling, one member of that group had business ties to Sheriff Simmons, including construction contracts and security services. This connection shifted the case from a missing person investigation to the strong possibility of organized murder protected by those sworn to uphold the law. Yet the evidence remained circumstantial. lacking the concrete proof needed for prosecution. The only thing certain was this Jamal had been led into a deadly trap, and those behind it had enough power to keep the truth buried for 7 long years. When the bodies of Malik and Ray underwent a more thorough forensic examination, the report from Dr. Cynthia Harris stunned everyone involved. Both victims' skulls showed not just fractures from an alleged collision, but distinct double breaks, concentrated in patterns consistent with blunt force trauma, the kind inflicted by a heavy object. Not by a fall or crash. Even more damning, their lungs contained no mud or swamp water, proving they were already dead before the van was submerged. In addition, traces of a powerful sedative were found in residual tissue samples from Malik, a drug commonly used to incapacitate kidnapping victims and extremely difficult to detect without specialized tests. These results completely overturned the initial assumption of an accident. Malik and Ray had been murdered before their deaths were staged, and they raised an even more agonizing question about Jamal if the other two were killed quickly. Why did Jamal alone vanish? Did he escape, or was he taken for another purpose? This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigative team because it confirmed they were no longer dealing with a disappearance, but with the targeted killing of federal agents, a capital crime that could put any conspirator on death row. Meanwhile, a young investigative assistant named Marcus Gaines made a crucial discovery while combing through storage archives, a box of documents misplaced among unrelated case files. Inside was a copy of traffic camera footage from a highway 5 miles from Caddo Crossing, recording a large truck driving in the opposite direction of the agent's van on the night they disappeared, time-stamped around 12:08 a.m. Most importantly, the truck's license plate led investigators to Leonard Broussard, a local businessman once suspected of ties to an interstate drug ring, but never convicted when questioned. Broussard feigned surprise, insisting he was just out making deliveries that night and remembered nothing unusual. Yet his statements quickly fell apart. He contradicted himself, saying he was hauling electronics one moment, construction supplies the next. Investigators also obtained GPS logs from the rental company that owned the truck, revealing it had stopped for more than 20 minutes near a vacant lot by the canal, exactly where the van's GPS signal began flickering. Broussard's presence at that time and location was no coincidence. It fit perfectly with the theory that the agent's van was forced off the road, the agents were abducted, and the vehicle was transported elsewhere before being dumped years later to fake an accident. As news of these findings spread, the families of Malik and Ray held an emotional press conference to demand justice. Malik's wife, Laverne Johnson, spoke tearfully before the cameras. "We waited 7 years in agony, clinging to hope, and now we know my husband didn't die in an accident, but because someone murdered him to hide something even more horrible." Malik's daughter Neve, now 17, clutched the engraved pen with her name that had been found by the creek, sobbing uncontrollably. Ray's family also shared their heartbreak, realizing the man they loved died in an act of violence, not a tragic workplace mishap. The press conference shook the local community, especially Black residents of the swamp region, who realized their years of silence had unintentionally enabled those responsible in the days that followed. Dozens of calls flooded the investigation hotline, with locals offering any detail they could remember. The community began to break the decades-old code of silence, finally standing up to the unseen forces of power and violence that had kept them quiet amid this rising tension. A man named Darius Hill, 44, came forward voluntarily. He had been a mechanic at the only garage near Caddo Crossing, servicing boats, trucks, and heavy vehicles in the swamp. In his statement, Darius revealed that on the night of the disappearance, he was coerced into opening the shop in the middle of the night for a group who brought in a white van, demanding he remove its tracking devices and swap out certain parts to prevent identification. Darius described 3 men in detail, including one whose voice matched perfectly with the threatening call Jamal's cousin Vanessa had received, and another wearing a jacket with a sheriff's badge from Iberville Parish, when shown photos of prior suspects. Darius immediately recognized Leonard Broussard, along with another man who had mysteriously died in an unexplained accident just months after the agents vanished. Darius's testimony, aligning precisely with the GPS timeline and location, shifted the entire course of the investigation. This breakthrough not only confirmed Broussard's direct involvement, but also revealed the presence of someone in a sheriff's uniform at the crime scene, strongly suggesting collusion by someone within law enforcement, possibly Sheriff Simmons himself or a close associate. The investigation now veered sharply toward the likelihood of inside complicity within the police force, a shocking but increasingly undeniable truth. As the investigation refocused squarely on Sheriff Simmons, the federal team scoured decades-old records stored at the parish sheriff's office. In a dusty file untouched for nearly 10 years, they uncovered a copy of the registration for a large motorboat purchased in Simmons' name just 1 week before Malik, Ray, and Jamal disappeared. Oddly, the registration was canceled only a few months later, citing a sale to an unknown buyer, when investigators tracked down the boat's registered docking site. An elderly dockhand recalled seeing Simmons's boat leaving the pier around 11:45 p.m. on the night of the disappearance, carrying several figures dressed in black. It returned close to 2 a.m. after a heavy downpour had begun. The dockhand remembered the boat's hull was caked with swamp mud and stained with dark smears resembling blood. But when he tried to ask about it, he was silenced by a menacing glare from a large, unfamiliar man accompanying Simmons. Terrified for his job and safety, he never reported what he saw. But now, a chilling picture was emerging that night. The three agents were likely forced off the bridge, taken aboard Simmons's boat, murdered, and made to vanish deep in the swamp, while their van was later manipulated to stage a fake accident. As news outlets began reporting these explosive new details, the state governor's office and senior officials abruptly pressured the DEA to thoroughly verify any allegations before releasing them, citing concerns over protecting the reputation of law enforcement agencies. Meanwhile, attorneys representing the Simmons family connected to powerful political circles quickly appeared on television, vehemently denying any wrongdoing and branding the allegations a smear campaign meant to discredit a decorated sheriff within the community. Public opinion split sharply. Some called the case a conspiracy theory, while others became convinced a horrific crime had been meticulously hidden for 7 years. Fear of retaliation kept many potential witnesses silent, as they had lived their entire lives under the shadow of men connected to Simmons. At the same time, investigators discovered key documents in the county archives had mysteriously gone missing, just as they searched for them, deepening the sense of obstruction and mistrust. Faith in the justice system began to crumble, not only among residents, but also within the sheriff's department itself, with some younger deputies quietly wondering if the very person meant to protect them could be behind such horror. Who was left to uphold the law? Then came a startling twist. An anonymous witness, a water taxi driver, came forward claiming that about 10 months after the disappearance, he had ferried a young black man with a gaunt look and a large scar on his forehead from an isolated creek dock to a small town over 50 kilometers from the swamp. The man spoke little, but urgently asked how to catch a bus to Atlanta. Investigators believed the description strongly matched Jamal. But after that moment, he vanished again. There were no bank records, no phone activity, and no sightings. Had Jamal escaped the original attack only to die from injuries or exhaustion on the road? Was he recaptured soon after, or did he deliberately go underground to protect himself for something he knew? Criminal profilers consulted by the DEA thought it plausible Jamal survived the assault and tried to flee. His questions about catching a bus showed a will to live, but what stopped him from reaching safety remains a haunting mystery. This ambiguous lead became the most gut-wrenching twist, yet Jamal may have had a chance. But someone or something took that chance away forever. As theories tangled and fragile, hopes crumbled. The families of the three agents plunged into despair. Jamal's loved ones agonized if he escaped. Why didn't he contact them? Did he flee out of fear? Or was he silenced? Ray's elderly parents were devastated, realizing their son may have been murdered by men wearing the same uniform they once trusted. The swamp community, too, was roiled with anger and guilt. Recognizing their long silence had let the perpetrators live freely for years. Online, demands for an independent investigation went viral, but so did false rumors, conspiracy theories, and heated threats between opposing groups. This chaos not only made the investigation more treacherous, but also laid bare a painful truth: justice cannot exist if a community no longer believes in itself or those meant to protect it. Amid this suffocating atmosphere, the lead DEA investigator faced a grave decision: either release all the evidence they had, risking political fallout and acting without enough proof for convictions, or keep their findings secret, hoping for more time to build a solid case, but risking that the mastermind might flee or erase more evidence. In this tense moment, a single misstep could bury the truth for years to come. After many sleepless nights, the lead investigator made the call to hold a press conference at the DEA headquarters in Baton Rouge, publicly releasing every detail. They had uncovered forensic findings proving Malik and Ray had been murdered, GPS data showing the van had been moved against their will, witness testimony confirming the presence of someone in a police uniform the night they disappeared, and financial records exposing Sheriff Simmons's suspicious dealings. Photocopies of the boat registration, bank transaction histories, and detailed maps of the van's movements were all laid out for the cameras. The press conference sent shockwaves not just through Louisiana, but across the entire country. Civil rights and black advocacy organizations immediately demanded an independent federal investigation. Stressing that this was more than a single crime, it exposed cracks in the very foundation of law enforcement, especially when the victims were black federal agents. The U.S. Department of Justice announced it would deploy a special task force, vowing to investigate every lead and hold anyone involved accountable, no matter their rank or agency. In Louisiana, the black community organized vigils and peaceful marches demanding justice for Malik, Ray, Jamal, and the countless others who had disappeared in the Atchafalaya swamp without ever being named. Hope was rekindled, but everyone knew the road to the full truth would be long and fraught with obstacles, even though the case file had enough evidence to indict Leonard Broussard and widen the net to others who helped cover up the crime. No one could say for sure what had become of Jamal after that fateful rainy night. There was no body, no financial or phone activity, no confirmed sighting. His family no longer dared to believe he was alive, yet had no proof he was dead. Their pain lingered like an unhealed wound, becoming an endless question that time refused to close. Malik's daughter, Nevaeh, told reporters more than once that she still dreamed of Uncle Jamal standing at her doorstep, saying everything had been a mistake and he had been trying to save his two brothers. That innocent dream, from a child who almost lost her father and did lose her beloved uncle, became an image that haunted the community for months. Meanwhile, people living near Caddo Crossing began sharing strange stories they'd kept to themselves, glimpses of a lone man wandering along the dark canals, soft cries carried on the mist. There was no evidence, but these tales made many believe Jamal had fought to the end, struggling to survive. Yet why he never returned or couldn't may forever remain a secret buried in the black waters of the swamp. The case was officially closed for the time being, as the main conspirators were arrested, but the file remained open should any new accomplices surface. In the final report to the Justice Department, the lead investigator wrote, "We do this not only to seek justice for 3 agents, but for a community forgotten for far too long. This loss is a reminder that in the darkest corners of our country, justice can still be out of reach." The image of Neve's engraved pen, found stuck in the mud like a nameless grave marker, became the enduring symbol of the case. It reminded everyone that silence can kill the truth, and even those who vow to protect justice can become its victims. Years later, at a memorial service, Ray's elderly parents, their hair gone white, held up a photo of their son and softly told reporters, "We may never know what really happened, but at least we know he didn't run. He stayed true to his mission." Those words echoed throughout the community for a long time, a testament to courage and a scar that refused to heal. The truth had been partially revealed, but pain and doubt lingered, and the story of 3 black DEA agents who vanished in the Louisiana swamp continued to be told. Not just in pursuit of justice, but as a warning sometimes. Truth and justice are 2 parallel paths that never meet,